Okay, it looks like it wants to cooperate. So we'll resume our meeting here. Item number 3 on our agenda is going to be roll call.
Beam.
Here.
DeWater.
Here.
Siebel.
Here.
Bender. Here. Walker.
Here.
Nice. Item number 4 is going to be approval of the November 17 amended agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, so we got a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Item number 5 is going to be approval of our November 4th, 2020 regular meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. This is a roll call vote.
Beam.
Yes.
DeWater.
Yes.
Siebel.
Yes.
Bender.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Item number 6 on the agenda is going to be approval of our consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second, I think. Steve, got that one? Okay, all in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
All right, item number 6. Item number 7 is going to be approval of our resolution calendar.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. This one is a roll call vote.
Beam.
Yes.
DeWater.
Yes.
Siebel.
Yes.
Bender.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Okay. Item number 7 on our agenda is going to be council to consider wastewater cost comparisons. So what you all have in your agenda is a cost comparison. This has been worked on by our engineer in multiple meetings with Waterloo and their staff and their engineers. So what you have in front of you is option 1A, which is we construct a pump station to Waterloo. So that's our infrastructure from the McClure option. That was $8.4 million, where we build that pipe underneath the cedar to pump. Okay. This one is a price, and what we did is I asked them to take comparatively the cost to treat per 1,000 gallons. So that way, any option we looked at, we had a comparable cost, right? So what you're seeing here, and just so you know, we'll have multiple meetings on that, no decision tonight or anything else, but this is just starting to get the information out there for the council and for the public, because we will have some public meetings. But what you're looking at is just, option 1A is just what they expect our cost to be to treat our wastewater per 1,000 gallons, okay? Option number B includes, now if you look at it, it includes some of, so let me back up. So Waterloo has about $100 million upgrades that they gotta do. So that's been in the news, that's public knowledge. So option number 1A realistically includes us helping with our portion of the phase of those upgrades, okay? So roughly it's would be the Evansdale rate of about $30 million of upgrades, okay? That's already baked into that cost, okay? Option 1B starts to take into their midterm and long-term improvements and how that could play out for Evansdale in the future, okay? And this is all hypotheticals with what we're working with right now. So if somehow we go to regionalization as a group, or Cedar Falls or anybody else comes on board, it kind of takes this plan and this model and just kicks it to the curb, right? So this was just planning on Evansdale, Waterloo working together currently, okay? Option 2, so we have 1A, 1B. Option 2 is going to be renovate our existing facility. So that was that $10.9 million. And that is where it comes out for the cost to treat. And that includes all of our debt services and all those type of things that go into that, right? So that's an actual expected cost that we will see with that option, right? And then you can see option number 3 is going to be just what it would cost to treat per 1,000 gallons on building a new facility, right? So that's a lot of information. In 1A, I will tell you, it's part of the, that includes $18 to $20 million worth of their biosolids that they are already underway, to upgrading, and $11 million of their liquids that they gotta use to address that plant, so. So any questions just about that initial release of numbers?
I did that one, right? Is it based on the gallons that we are currently using when these numbers go on ground?
Yeah, so, what we got is, this is, excuse me, go back to the mic here. So that's based off of our 5-year average of what we've produced for waste. So that includes all our ups and downs and all that, because, well, that's a good question, so it just takes that average, right? So if we have an extremely dry year, we'll probably be on the low side of that average, or extremely wet, we'll be on the high side with our INI, right? Yeah. And I think roughly, I got a sheet, as we go deeper down this path, the Evansdale waste versus the Waterloo waste is about, I think, 3.62% of their plant. So that's how this kind of factors in. So when they built this rate, we got it built out of how they split their salary benefits, their electricity, their plant equipment, all that stuff, between the plant versus their collection system, right? So we wouldn't be charged for their collection system because we still have our own to maintain, and that's built into our long-range pricing, because we still got to manage our lift stations, we still got to address our I&I in the future, we still got to do all that. That will still be our infrastructure, not Waterloo.
Has Waterloo entertained any type of terms as far as time frame that they'll work with us, like a contracted price for a period of 5 years, 10 years, or are they just wanting to bounce as they create more costs?
I think they're open to that, but right now this is just that first phase of getting this information released to the public, right? Just like us, they don't want to, they kind of want to see what the appetite is. They don't want to spend a bunch of money on attorneys to kind of build that out, or nor do we, until we really know that it's a feasible option for us. So that's a good question, and I brought that up about locking it in for a certain period of time to protect us. And if you look at option 1B, even that pricing, that's kind of where that kind of modified a little bit, where they don't expect anything to really change until roughly about 10 years out. So I think, what's attached, I guess, I don't know. I think I have the old form, but Waterloo went back and
It was just
revised
that,
it.
it was just that.
Yeah, but I think they moved some of this at FY '28 out.
Right, you're looking farther out on the dating.
Yeah, so,
Here's
right.
FY 28 on there.
Yeah, okay.
So 5 years.
Yes, but they did remove, see if they took that 7132 and moved it to 10 years out, yes. So the version I'm looking at is not the most updated, you'll have the most updated version. Yep.
Another question I had, and this is probably just as much for Chris even as much as it is for you. If we did decide to, say, refurbish our plant, build a new plant, does this also factor in the cost of, I know if we built a new plant, they're talking 2 additional employees to be able to run that plant, plus a 30% increase in power usage or energy usage.
I don't know if I have the answer to that.
You know what I'm saying?
I do.
So we've got additional costs out there, so.
Yeah, so I will tell you, just from looking at this, just holistically, I think this kind of goes down the path that we all talked about last September, October. Option 3, to me, kind of rules itself out.
Right.
To be honest with you. And I don't know, I'll check on that operating cost. So McClure, so I'm gonna release these numbers at our last meeting. I cleared it with Waterloo, but, they just wanted one more opportunity for McClure to kind of go over how we came to this. And he's got a whole back-end spreadsheet that's pretty sharp. Alex is, that's his deal, right? So where it talks about operating costs and how you can expect that to increase over so many years, and it's pretty detailed, so I can check on that for you. But it's a good point, right? Because I heard that too.
Yeah, and that's what we wanna see, is we wanna
Yep.
see whether over the years we're gonna get a savings back
Right,
for going one way or the other, not just, you know,
right,
that here's this initial cost and this is what it's gonna cost you, because
right.
of course you buy a car that takes 3 drivers, you need 3 drivers.
Yep, right. Yep. Increased labor. So operating costs, electricity 30%, and then increase labor to staff, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, just to clarify, so that, don't be afraid to ask questions, because we're gonna be talking about this. We're gonna have to make a decision in the next, roughly, I pulled the paper, about 2 to 3 months. So we're gonna have many conversations about this over the course of time. Yes, sir?
Yeah, kind of muffled, but just what kind of a savings are we talking about by going with Waterloo compares building a new plant?
Yeah, so, I'll give you a quick snapshot. So, in option 1A, which is what we're kind of really talking about now, by FY '23, when we have to have the construction done, we're talking about $6.55 per 1,000 gallons, versus renovating our facility is $6.89 to treat per 1,000. And then 5 years out, it's $7.04 per 1,000 for option 1A for Waterloo. And then FY '28 for option 2, which is renovating, is $7.29.
So basically, initially in that first year, you're gonna see $6.55 for cost initially that first year. If we pump over to them to treat the water, and what was that, $7.92 if we, refurbish our
But
plant.
that's the difference in the cost of this, of treating it. But what
Correct.
will this plant, if
That's-
we built that plant, what would be the difference?
Oh, if we rebuilt the plant, let's say FY '23, the plant's online like it's supposed to be, it's $7.92 to treat per 1,000. So it's quite a bit more.
So within that 5 years, you're also receiving a savings from that from that $6.55 until that plant's completed or whatever.
Yeah, this has got us doing, is that 300? Chris, help me out here, even, what's our annual volume? Is that 2.1 million gallons, right? Like that's what they're factoring all this off of?
Annual?
Yeah. Well, here, I can do this, I can add a couple zeros here. Oh, maybe 216 million. Yeah, that's more like it. That's what they got on our average at.
Yeah.
Yeah, 216 million gallons. Is what our average is. So you figure, about roughly $1.50 more per 1,000 gallons, you would take that $1.50 times 216,445. So roughly $500,000 extra a year. Roughly.
But we would have to shell out how many dollars to do this? In other words, the plant was what, 12 million, but we're gonna have to shell out Waterloo to hook up to it and everything, do you know?
Well, our water retreatment cost is so, they're expecting that in the first few years to be, and this is just our engineering taking our costs, and that includes our collection system, managing our lift station, our collection system, and everything else. At, let's say FY '23, for example, to be $330,225. Now, you gotta also add the debt services for the borrowing for whatever you do, right? Whether it's the pipe underneath the river or whatever. So that's expecting year 1, 2023, total sewer cost to be 1.4 million, okay? Now, if you take out some of that debt service and move some of the Waterloo treatment out, in year 1 with the new plant, it's showing to be 1.7 million. So by, let me just say, I'll say, when we talk about this, we'll talk about 5 years out because those are really the most accurate. So in FY '28, so 5 years after building the new plant, we're talking about 1.545 million. For, option 1A, we're talking about 1.69 million for option 1B, which is still Waterloo. And then option 3, 5 years out, is 1.8 million, or 1.825, or renovating our facility 5 years out is 1.6. So realistically, your options of connecting to Waterloo and renovating, as the way it sits right now, without more tweaking, because this is all preliminary numbers, look very close in cost. But then you have to look at the other part of the intangibles of connecting.
You gotta look at operating costs, you gotta
Yeah.
look at, do we need a class 5,
Yep.
type scenario in a class 2 situation?
Or flooding for our facilities, it takes us out of that game to,
Right.
it takes some of those intangibles, like, do we want out of the wastewater business? So, and there's that other, regionalization is still something that's being discussed. So Waterloo is doing a lot to figure out what the valuation of their facility is. And like I said, if, you get a big player like Cedar Falls come on board and we go to regionalization, now our volume is much smaller. And it completely changes the game for us, right? Then at that point, we've already built the $8.4 million infrastructure underneath the river. If you think even long range out, 20 years down the road, if when Elk Run and Raymond's new plant is ending its life cycle, well, now we already got the infrastructure for it to pump their volume plus our volume underneath the river for regionalization too. So you got some of that long range planning that comes into it as well.
It's gonna cost $8 million to build a pipe under that river.
Yeah, so you have to have, because they gotta bore it. Yeah.
7.4?
Well, it's 7.4 for one pipe, but even from that call with the DNR, there's no redundancy. So they don't even know if they'd allow us to do that one pipe. So the 8.4 million is to have the 2 pipes. So it almost makes sense to have that redundancy for that little bit of extra volume. Because if we can't pump it out, we got a problem.
Man.
But it's all good feedback that we'll just continue to talk about over the following meeting. So any other questions from anybody? Okay. All right. So as you think about stuff, don't be afraid to ask, because we're still going to have your game. So McClure, we asked them, we did that proposal for them. When did they send an email? Like from the meetings, they're about 85% through that initial proposal, maybe. You remember? So we're trying to kind of keep them on the back burner until we figure out the point where we talk to attorneys. So we might be ready to start talking to attorneys hopefully by January if we're really thinking that this is something we want to explore. So, all right. Moving on. We got item number 8, which is going to be, wait a minute. We don't need a motion for 7, do we? Okay, all right.
I just put it there just for some.
No, you're good. No, I just kind of messed myself up with that one. Go on. Option number 8 is going to be request from Park Board to enter into an engineering agreement for Deerwood Park sanitary sewer and electrical project in the amount not to exceed $34,000. So, Tom, do you want to come up and talk to the council?
How we doing? Hope, just to start out, first of all, some of the work that the Park Board has done this year, you've noticed we have 3 new playgrounds in. I think we just have to put a little more mulch in there, and we may wait till spring to do that in order to let the mulch that's already been blown in there settle some. And I think we're gonna put some barriers around it just to dress them up, so. When Chris, took all the old stuff out, some of the barriers were kind of rotted, so I think we're gonna need to put those back in to dress them up. Campground this year, from April to October, which included actually a 2-week delay. If you remember, we were closed because of COVID. We brought in, this year, $183,583, which also included the pop, wood, laundry, ice, and dump fees. This is a record year for us. Our next highest year was back in 2017, which was roughly 168,000. So we went real good this year, gangbusters. A few years ago, we looked at expanding the sewer lots within the campground. We've been kind of looking at this off and on. over the last 3 or 4 summers, we've consistently ran out of full hookup sites down there. We can't keep them open. As soon as one pulls out, before nightfall, another one moves in. Full hookup as well as Wi-Fi services are the most sought after amenities in campgrounds today. People don't like to have to go dump their trailer afterwards, so the more full hookup sites we have, the better that we are. Since we started looking at this, we now have an amusement park that's being built within 5 miles of us. The amusement park has been promised to be larger than Adventureland in Altoona. With the exception of KOA, Campground Deerwood is the closest campground to the new park. Some things to consider. Currently, we're the cheapest campground in Blackhawk County. As far as rates, our full hookup rates are $19 an hour. I think KOA a night, Mike, I think you've been out there a couple times. What's the rates out there, KOA?
I've never camped out there.
You haven't? Okay. I've heard they're anywhere from $15 to $25 a night for camping, as far as either electric and water or full hookups. Your full hookups are $25 a night. We haven't raised any rates in over 5 years. We are right now studying that possibility of possibly raising them this next season, but we're still looking into that. The sewer project will encompass 37 lots. This is on both the east and west side of the roadway leading to the shower house. And you know where Roger stays, from that intersection down to the shower house is what we're looking at, both sides of the road. This will raise our full hookup sites from 58 to 95 lots. Engineers had advised it'd be easier to run down the center of the roadway due to the trees in the area. That's still up in the air as to whether or not we're gonna do it that way or possibly take it down the side. Either way, we've got to tear up the road. This project also encompasses upgrading the electrical in those 37 lots. Currently, when it's extremely hot, we need to put fans on the electrical panels to keep the breakers from tripping. But it has to be an upgrade in the electrical through there. Roger saved us this year by, if you ever went by there and seen a fan hanging on one of them, that's why, it's to keep it cooled down. The lift station at the end of the park has been looked at by both Chris Shares and Chris Even. The only service that's going into that station is the shower house right now, so they said that there's plenty of capacity to be able to run those 37 lots into that lift station. Lift station is also looking at to be raised out of the floodwaters. Chris Shares has looked at it, and at first we were going to have the engineers look at it, and Chris says that that's something that they can do on their own. We don't need the engineers to look at that. But that'll basically bring it up out of the floodwaters, so we don't have all that flood water going in, which should help down at the sewer plant as well when we flood down there. Currently we have 2 bids for the engineering of the projects. I don't know, I'm hoping you guys have those. Okay, both bids are very close in comparison. You're very familiar with Bolton and Minks. They came in with their bid, which is right around $34,000. WKS, I believe it's out of Dubuque, and I think they're doing your plant in Jessup.
No.
They're not? Did they look at that? WHKS? That's what they informed me, so. Their costs appear to be slightly cheaper, but they don't include staking. Bolton and Mink does not include an electrical engineer either. That's the difference between the two. Bolton and Mink doesn't have an electrical engineer, and WHKS does, so they can add that electrical in there. But so Bolton and Mink might be a little higher down the road, but they said that it should be fairly close. The staking part with WHKS, they said they'd leave that up to the contractor to do that. The park board has approved use of either one of these engineers to design, plan, and arrange. However, they thought they'd leave that up to you guys to decide, you know, which one you want to go with. At the current time, a rough estimate of the project is between 263 to 319,000, and I believe that's with engineering costs.
I just did a quick search, looks like a 50 to 30 amp service for a full hookup on a KOA is $60 a night.
$60, yeah. So I think we're gonna get the business, being as close as what we are, and I think this is the time to do this. I know this has been talked about for a good number of years.
So, Tom, real quick question for you. So, you know, we still got that walk-on grant that's kind of in limbo. Where does that $34,000 put you if the walk-on grant doesn't come through, which is
If
a
it
lot of
doesn't come through, I think we're gonna be really close to the dollar mark that we've got in our
Okay.
grant right now, according to
Okay.
Travis. If that lock-on grant does come through, then yeah, we may have some extra additional monies there to,
Okay. Gotcha.
which is, I didn't say that, Myers, the park at Angels Park is also looked at being removed and redone as well. And that's part of this lock-on grant that's been held up by the federal government or the Indians, or I'm not sure who's got it held up right now, but, we're ready to go once we get a date.
Yep, and I think we found out it's past tribal now, right? And now it's stuck back in what, SHPO? So we've made some progress.
Shippo, the one that took it.
Right, yeah, right. So we made it past the tribal part, so that's good. But yeah, so I think, you know, for y'all to consider, I mean, I think when I first saw this, and I think I talked to Tom initially, is, you know, with each engineer including, you know, something that the other one's leaving out, it almost feels that Bolton and Mink, who we have a close relationship with, it seems like we'd be able to keep our finger on the pulse a little bit better versus somebody that we've done zero work with, so.
I've actually worked with,
Okay.
WHKS is actually a really good firm as well. I would say, dealing with both, they're real close to one another.
And WHKS actually called us, apparently we must have read it in our minutes or something like that, that we're looking at this, so they actually came to us.
WHKS does a lot of sewer, sanitary. So, I mean, a lot, so. That's their focus.
So I guess really for the council then, it's one, either, you know, you guys can take action on one or the other. You know, obviously, you know, either one of the engineering firms, you can table, or, you know, those are kind of where we're at, if you guys want. Does anybody have any sort of interest?
So I would have to recuse myself, because I do work for both.
Okay, that's fine. It's actually admirable, so I appreciate that.
So what's the discrepancy there? It said something about the contract not to exceed 34,000.
Mhm.
But their, bid shows 26,900. We put the highest.
Which one, WKS or Bolton and Mink?
Well, I don't know, this is, the request to, item 8, to enter into an engineering agreement. And then the basis of compensation on WHKS's proposal totals 25,700 and then the mileage of 1,200. You've seen these, haven't you? So,
Oh, yeah, so, yes, so that is built in there as the not to exceed the highest potential bid.
yeah,
So if you,
well, I know,
Right.
but there's a
yeah,
big difference there. You expect that much of a cost overrun?
well, yeah, so that's the difference, is the staking and, you know, whatever the electrical part plays in that.
Yeah, WHKS does have electrical engineering, so that's built into theirs right now, but Bolton and Mink does not have an electrical engineer, so.
Yeah.
I think this is why we decided to let you guys decide who.
Well, we only have one bid here,
You don't have
for
the.
the engineering, right?
You should have two, you should have Bolton and.
I thought two. Yeah, mine computer crashed.
Actually, WHKS came down on their bid a little bit, they were actually the same price as Bolton and Mink, but they came down after the lift station to rise that, we took that off of there, so then they came down some.
So is Bolton Mink figuring on doing that lift station as well, or no?
No. So that's maybe where the electrical engineering might come in at, that kind of balances it out.
Yeah, I'm getting that. My whole computer crashed for a minute.
Yeah.
So director, director.
It should be happy.
What's that? What am I missing? Oh, construction statement, 3,000.
Yeah.
So that's what they lined out for a construction statement, is 3,000. And then WHKS is showing, well, it's about wash, it's the electrical at 33.
But we don't know, because if we went with Bolton and Mink, then we had to have an electrical engineer on top of that fee, right? So that would be an
I mean, I wasn't a part of those conversations, so I assume that's a yes then, right, Tom?
Yes.
Yes.
Myself, I'd rather go with the WHKS that has an electrical engineer behind them to do it in the hour end of the bid, so I would favor that.
So is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion for WHKS
I'll second.
for the engineering.
So we got a motion for WHKS, and we have a second. Okay, all in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Alright, thank you, motion carries. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Oh, and just so you know, as he's talking about the parks, there's been a lot of positive stuff coming out with that park equipment, so it seems like everybody's really pleased and anxious to get their kids on it, so.
Well, there's a lot of that equipment was probably was older than me and Fred, and, I mean, hell, we played on them when we were kids. So, it's probably about time that it got replaced, but
I want
It
to
won't last
take a
as long,
second and thank Tom for the work that they've done, and the park equipment, everybody's happy, and thanks to Chris and his guys for putting it in. And, Fuller Park down here looks good. Parks made great improvement this year.
Yep.
Thank you, Tom.
thank you.
You very good. All right. Item number 9 is request to enter an agreement with Best Services for preventative maintenance in the amount of $13.50 for annual maintenance on the generator at the CRC, Arbutus lift station, and East End lift station.
Motion approved, mayor's request. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries, thank you. Item number 10, is to formalize that initial bid that you all saw from Bolton and Mink for Eagles Landing. So they can kind of move on with that process and we keep engineering in the right bucket, but it's request to enter into the agreement with Bolton and Mink for engineering services in the amount of $227,390.
I make a motion to accept that agreement to both names for $227,390.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries, thank you. Here we are for the fire department. Request from Ryan Phillips to accept low bid of $122,683.17 from Sandry Fire Supply for the purchase of 17 SCBA's. That's probably our FEMA grant that we talked about.
Make a motion. Oh, sorry. I'd make a motion to accept the bid as we know.
Okay, all right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
All right, looks like they're lucky to get new gear. All right, item number 12 on our agenda is request from police chief to send Jordan Womochill to the Iowa Enforcement Academy for the cost of $51.20. So I'll just preface this one before we vote on. So we have our candidate. We were kind of discussing a way to modify that wage a little bit. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But we had a meeting with the union today as we started the police negotiations. We've came to an agreement on what to offer this individual until they get certified. So, otherwise we would have had to pay on patrol 1, which is $21.63 an hour. And I think we've come to a reasonable agreement. So what'll happen is you'll be able to approve him going to the academy tonight. Then I'll send you all an email with the wage tomorrow and ask for email approval. And then we'll formalize it in the next city council meeting so we can get him going and get him some street experience before he goes to the academy in March? Yeah, March of next year.
Make a motion to accept the chief's request.
Okay.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
All right, looks like you're on the top of the employees. All right, item number 13 is the council to consider removal of the remaining water works board members. So what council has.
Right, we missed 13 about the road patch, man.
Oh, I don't have the new agenda. Well, that's a problem. Okay, yep, here we go. Item number 13 is actually a request for Public Works Director to replace improper road patch located at 705 Grand Boulevard before closing of Aspro. So I'll explain that one a little bit. So this goes to our meeting a couple weeks ago when we added in the excavation permitting. So it was in our code. We didn't really follow our own code, let me just put it that way. So what happens is people are digging into our streets, replacing it however they wanted to, and the grand repair put us in a really tough spot where it was about an inch up, and we were concerned that it was going to break our snowplow blades as we moved it because it went over into the other lane. So since our meeting 2 weeks ago, we have now rectified that so we can put the contractor on the hook to follow our process. And we worked with the attorney on this, and we were kind of limited since we weren't following our own process. So with Aspro closing, we made the decision just to get it done last week. So, and actually it looks really nice. So amazing what happens when Aspro, who does asphalt for a living, does work. But it looks really good, and but we do have it in the process to avoid that with the Public Works Director and Building Inspector inspecting those things before they get final sign off. But we needed it fixed before we got underway.
What was the cost on that?
It was, what is the 1592? Was it? 1582, yeah. So,
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was just saying, as we came into this, so Chris reached out to Aspro, was like, because we knew they were closing last week, and just like, hey, can we get this done? They're like, we can fit you in, but they didn't even have an estimate for us because we put them under our time crunch. So,
Can I ask what wasn't followed that you couldn't go back on the contract?
well, so we did not have so there's an excavation permit in our code that the city has never used. So, and in that excavation permitting, we sign off on it, and they tell us when it's gonna be completed, and then we do the final inspections. So we have since worked with the attorney, and we're also gonna request when they break into our infrastructure like that they bond themselves for 2 years. So if that said issue fails, then they're still on the hook for it for 2 years.
Right.
And the other thing is when you guys approved that permit modification last week for patching, we included the compaction test that we will make sure it gets done, right? So for a patch, we can kind of control that with team services giving us a flat rate. But for big projects, they're going to be required to do the compaction test, but that's based off of lengths, and you can't really build that into the permit. So we're gonna go back to making sure that compaction tests are done and it's signed off on, so. So hopefully, we can fix this problem going forward, but unfortunately, we were.
Short term, I suppose it's gonna cost more to have excavations done, but long term, it makes more sense.
Well, so what's been happening, and, that's the part that I've seen in my short time here is the stuff is being done, it's put back poorly, and then, talking to Chris, then, in a year or two, then taxpayers are now paying to fix that stuff, and that's not how that works. It should be on the person that broke into it to do it right.
Well, and really it's that on all the infrastructure, we deal with that, and sanitary, all the time.
Well, I imagine you guys will compaction test too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And we were just kind of just throwing gravel on it, let people drive over it, and that's not the right way to do it.
You still need a motion?
Yes.
I'll make that.
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please respond,
Aye.
all right, so now, we're on to 14, right? Is that the 14? Okay. So item number 14 is gonna be now, let me change my numbers here. If only I had somebody to set me up properly. So item number 14 is council to consider the removal of the remaining water board members. So I'll add it to the packet for next week, but council has it in front of them. So my issues comes from, I had a meeting with Mr. Morris a few months ago down at CRC. Kind of outlined my concerns about how the water department is being run, lack of accountability, lack of controls. And at that time, I was under the impression that there's going to be some positive traction on that. Okay. Well, we've now moved on to the point where that has not happened. I sent you guys that email last week where I have some issues with customer service not being addressed. I have issues with the overtime, the state audit about minutes being published. That was the state of Iowa. You guys have that in front of you from the auditor. Called out that minutes weren't being published on time. I sent that email after the first minutes were published to the water board. No action was taken, and that deadline was missed again. So that's slightly frustrating. The other issue I have is you guys have from the state of Iowa, so I had to do a formal complaint with the Iowa Public Information Board to get the timesheets that we all requested back in, I think, August. So I had a conversation with Mr. Morris, mentioned that, hey, the city council, approved unanimously to provide those documents. The response was no. Our attorney told us not to, and, I kind of just politely replied that you guys are a government entity, you really don't have that option, right? Because it's open records. So that's the stance that was taken. I had to do that complaint. So lo and behold, the state of Iowa forced that issue to provide those documents, which we're still going through those right now. You guys also have an email where, Mr. Morris said that their attorney told them to not release that. So in my email to is it Gallus or Gallus?
Yes.
Gallus, okay. I specifically, with the Iowa Public Information Board, mentioned, I said, Pat, I was told you recommended your client to violate open records. And his response was, I don't believe anyone recommended that my client violate anything. So that's the response he gave back to myself in the state of Iowa. So, also in that audit, it was talking about getting vacation hours down. They're supposed to be down to a certain limit. I can only assume that that has not happened, and it'll come up on the audit again. And if you look back, one of the conversations I had with Mr. Morris is from the moment the city unmerged the waterworks and they kind of went off on their own, overtime has continued to go extremely high. So if you look, there's been a building trend, FY13, overtime for the year was 12 and a half hours. FY14, 3.75 hours for the year. And then there's a part-time assistant there. During that time, FY15, it was 29 hours. FY16, there's a full-time assistant now, and overtime has gone up to 24 hours. And then it goes to 74, FY17, 82, FY18, 86 hours, FY19, 215 and a half hours. And so far, as of roughly March of 20, the overtime, now that's not a complete year, was 163 hours. So I have concerns that if all this overtime is being worked and we're still not following state guidelines, where is the oversight, right? So if you go back to the previous, in that audit, it mentions rates. So the city also lost out on $14,124 from improper garbage billing. And also, I don't think it's been since 2011 that the waterworks has assessed people's delinquent bills, which means the city loses out and the water department loses out if those taxes, that stuff's not assessed to their taxes. So that's, all this has been, you guys can have all this stuff, it's all open record stuff anyways, but, you guys can have whatever you want out of this, but, so that's concerning. One, overtime's not under control, and two, we're gonna continue to violate state auditor recommendations, which, I know if that's the city, we'd be all over that. I know the concern is, hey, you're picking on the water board, but I can tell you from some of my department heads, we've had some tough conversations about accountability. So it's not the water, I'm not gonna say the water department's not excluded from those conversations, and they definitely should be involved in those conversations. So before, I think that's roughly what I had for that item. Council, any discussion?
Are we gonna hear anything from them? Are they gonna?
I'd love to.
Yeah, we can have Fred come up, but I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask me anything about any of the information that I just shared with you all. But yes, we can absolutely give them a chance to speak.
I know I've definitely heard some updates, and, I know Dottie's new, hasn't been there for very long. I think there's a learning curve. There's obviously a lot of issues. This is stuff that we should be talking about and talking with them about. There was an individual who was on the board for a long period of time. His expertise would have been welcomed, but he was not allowed to come back. So I think we're missing that. So I think that's definitely one point that I see, is that we've got newer members, and I want to hear what they have to say, but I have a tough time just eliminating them without having a big discussion and talking through this and seeing if things can be rectified.
Well,
Our biggest problem is leadership, and, I don't know who draws the final card on that, but I know as being chair of a couple of committees, it seemed to me that would fall on the chair, that he gets suggestions or she gets suggestions, and then they act on it, and they are the final boss. I'm sorry, I can't agree with you with eliminating the whole board, because I don't think that's real fair to a person that's been on the board for 12 months, that they're supposed to know everything, and these problems started long before that particular board member did.
Agreed.
And
they only meet once a month.
If the fault's gonna fall, it's gonna fall with the head person.
Well, I'm not in favor of removing the board members. I had talked to Troy about this, and I felt like we needed to elevate the discussion from just staff members to their board and our board. And if there's concerns, and obviously they're all on the table now, I feel like we need to give the water board a chance to respond and see how we can work through this. Because as I mentioned to Troy, I think we have a pretty good water board, and I see it as a lack of respect to just remove them. So that's kind of my issue there.
I don't have a problem with keeping the whole water board, but
Yeah.
I definitely would not be in favor of moving somebody that's only been on a year when the problem's been for 3 years.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that I'm concerned about.
Well, and certainly not diminishing Troy's concerns, because they are of major concern, and the fact that somehow there was this issue with the attorney, somehow on record saying not to release reports, I lost it. It was time to get a new attorney, if an attorney ever said that. He should be replaced.
Well, the way I see it, tonight could be laid on the law. You've either got to come in compliance with the state laws, you've got to come in compliance with all the rest of the things that are expected of you. And we might come back and, who knows, maybe 6 months, take a look. If it hasn't changed, we might have to clean it.
Yeah.
We can't have violation, it just can't be anymore.
I agree. I would like to hear from the board to find out why this has been taking place. I mean, you've got to have some type of feeling of why this is happening, what's going on. I mean, it's right up under your purview, so, you wanna talk about?
Yeah, Fred, you want to
Let
come
us know what's going on?
A quick question before you talk. Is there not like an audit done by the state each year for the city?
Oh, yeah.
And are there not audit comments in there
No,
regarding that?
not about this stuff. So they have a separate audit. They're not under the same audit.
So, but aren't they required to have?
We're an
state audit as
autonomous
well?
board.
They do.
We have our own audit.
And so do you have does the auditor come back with comments?
Well, absolutely.
That's
And then you
what I
respond to
have.
those comments?
Yes, we do.
So are those problems the same as what he has?
That's what I'm reading off of, is the state audit.
The after action or the auditor gave us nothing but
Okay.
praise. He had a few little things on there. But for the most part, said we're doing a wonderful job.
Yeah, I just wondered because I know from my own, with the schools, we have an audit every year and then we get auditor comments, that's a common thing.
Mhm.
And then we explain ourselves as to
Mhm.
why we had those comments or our response to them.
Right.
And then they either approve it or say, no, that's not acceptable, you have to do something else. And then they come back and tell us what
Which
we
we
need to
did.
do.
We're fine with them. They're,
Well, this is, I guess the reason I'm asking Fred is not because of the audit as much as it is, we all know that there's a breakdown, you know?
now, I don't have your list, so you might have to ask me one at a time the questions. I'll be glad to answer them. But with him, with a lawyer, is that within mind that between the council, but there was already a petition going around to eliminate the water board. Okay, so I called up the lawyer and I asked him, I said, listen, this is what's going on. They're trying to do like a hostile takeover. They're trying to take over the board. And they're requesting this, this, and this. He says, and this isn't in my vocabulary, tell them to go pound sand. Call me if they've got questions. And that's exactly what he said to me. Now, he might not say that now, that's exactly, but it wasn't under the auspice of open records law. It was under the auspice of, I think he's talking about, okay, they're trying to take over, don't give them any information. You know, so I don't know where his head was at, where he was thinking the open meetings law or whatever the violation was. That's what he told me to do. Don't give them nothing. He said, tell them to call me if they want anything. So I didn't know what to do. That's why I called the lawyer.
Now, let me tell you this though. All kinds of things have been discussed about the water board. And it's been because of constant issues with the audits. It's been with, bad communications out of your staff here, with people, things of that sort. These are ongoing issues. And,
When were these conversations had?
you know,
What are you talking about private conversations or?
I'm just talking about,
Because we haven't
what
discussed
we've
this.
had here,
I don't
in City
remember,
Hall.
I don't think
I
we've
dealt
discussed it at
with the
length.
water department as well. And a lot of times, you know, one time they're pleasant, next time they're not. You know, I mean, you come up here, our taxes, you know, eventually pay for all of this, as well as the space, as well as, you know, and it does reflect on us. All that I'm asking Fred is that if he knows that those were the things that were going on, I would think you would want to be the shining star. I would think that you would go back to, you know, the people, especially the people that are involved with the public, and say, hey, this has gotta stop, man.
Okay, we're an autonomous board, okay? Now, he may not like that, but, okay, so I'm under the auspice that we're self-regulating, we have our own audits, we have our own money, we have our own employees, okay? The buck stops with us, we have to answer to that, okay? Well, when he's saying, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, we're addressing every single one of those issues, but I don't know that I have to go back to him and report every single issue. So,
We're not asking that,
well, like the overtime. Since he talked,
here-
we've had
here's-
7 hours of overtime since July, okay? The overtime, with the exception of this last week where we had a person off, you know, half your office is off on COVID, so we had to have some overtime, okay? But other than that, we've had 7 hours total of overtime since July. That was dealt with. He said it was a problem, we looked at it, we dealt with it. What else is on the list? 'Cause I mean, we've
Your
addressed it.
minutes, you're failing to do the minutes already twice this year.
Okay, the minutes that are missing right now is the server was shut down. She was supposed to come in and finish that up, and those minutes didn't get done because the server was shut down, and she was scheduled to do that over the weekend.
You don't need a server to use Microsoft Word, right?
We were told
You don't.
not, well, you can't get it off the computer.
Okay.
Ask Deanne, she's the one that told us that we couldn't do it, and then we talked to the, what's the guy's name?
Corey.
Corey, and he says, yeah, I'm gonna be working on it. Okay, well, we're not coming in this weekend, and she had scheduled that time to get it done. And Char had been off for 2 weeks, so she's doing both her and Char's work, and didn't get done.
But, you know, going back to the example is when I moved to Evansdale, the very first time I came up here to get my water hooked up, I was told, Evansdale doesn't have anything to do with it, we're our own. That's how I found out. Was the first time I ever came to hook up my water was, oh, well, they don't have anything to do with it.
Which there's nothing wrong with clarifying that, that's how it is in other cities, it's perfectly fine to separate yourself from the city so that the
Yeah, but it
customer
was
has an
more, there was almost
understanding.
more of a vindictive type factor of having to point it out. I don't care, I came up to get my water.
That's how you took it, that's understandable, but that's not necessarily how it was meant.
You know.
Yeah, we were set up for a copy from Waterloo. That basically, instead of, as a new administration comes in, all the rules change and everything else, you need
Sure.
a steady ship. You can't be going up and down with every new guy, you know, to
And
change all the
don't
rules.
get it wrong, I'm not attacking the water board. What I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out why these things keep coming up. And why aren't any of them being pounded back down? I mean, that's the issue.
But they
It's
are
all-
being pounded down, it sounds like they
We're
are
listening.
being worked through.
We spent 8 hours on the city employee manual, and, you know, that, when you have 1 hour or some month meetings, that takes a long time. So we have the one meeting, and it's in here, and so we get chewed out for tying up the bathrooms too long or whatever, so told to move, so then we moved to city, or to the CRC, and then get chewed out for not informing, which, you know, we post the minutes that, you know, so it's just this petty stuff that's going back and forth, that just doesn't need to happen.
Well, I mean, again, you can see it as petty and I'm fine, because this will go on long past me, but there needs to be accountability for the process. And that's why we're in the position we are, so. You know, you can spin it, you can have whatever way you want to address it,
We are
however.
working on it.
But there's a transparency thing, right? You know, you're like, well, I don't think I need to go back and share with them. Well, there's that transparency piece that you probably should.
There is a division without a doubt, and that definitely needs to be worked through, because I think that's unfortunate that we have that in the city. So I hope that can get resolved between all of you.
I like him, I like working with him, I got no problems with it.
Fred, how long have you been a chair?
Citywide.
I've only been on for, when did I go on? About a year and a half, I mean, so, and
January.
the first, I missed 5 months because I already, when they asked me to come on, I said, listen, I got this trip, I'm going to Alaska and Canada, I'm gonna be gone for 5 months, and they knew that, so, I might have had half a dozen meetings in when I got nominated chair, and you don't learn nothing that fast, and the learning curve is like crazy, because you don't know all the politics that are going on, and understand this office don't talk to this office, and so you know, a lot of things get lost, and we all need to work on that, big time.
Fred, one thing I'm gonna say as a councilman is, I think the communication line is pretty clear here at City Hall. You being the chair, and I take you as being educated to know these things, and if the mayor can come up with an audit that says certain things, this isn't picking on anybody. There's negative things with the committee. If I was in charge of the committee, I'd want to get these things corrected now or in the past, what's going on. And it seems to me like, rather than accepting it or giving us a plan of what you're gonna do to make it better where this doesn't come up for the mayor to oversee and say that these things are wrong, I have a problem with that. I know,
But virtually everything on there has already been corrected except for the minutes. The overtime is corrected, the vacation hours, that was corrected in that year, and they had a, what is your plan to get around it? She had a ton of vacation that had to be used up, all that's been corrected. What else is on there? Because everything on there except for the minutes being late.
but was that stuff corrected because the mayor brought it to your attention?
No,
You corrected on your committee yourself, all these inconsistencies.
yes, that was done before we ever talked.
Now, one more question. Would you have given the time cards, to the city on your own?
Absolutely. And the overtime, that was all, you know, from years ago. We got nothing to do with that. This board's got nothing to do with any of that. As soon as he said, hey, there's a problem here, we looked at the manual, yep, there's a problem, let's fix it. We fixed it. We've had 7 hours of overtime since then.
And I'm glad that was figured out, because that was definitely wrong, the way that was being managed.
Whose responsibility is it to provide you the information for the audits, and whose responsibility is it to report, do the report?
I think the same auditor that does the city does us. So is that your question?
Is that what you're
Yeah, who provides the information on time? In other words, when they say it's done on time, what's all that about?
Oh, I think you're asking, so would you talk about like the minutes violations and
Right,
stuff?
correct.
That'd be the office manager for the waterworks.
Well, Fred, I've got a couple of questions that are totally different, and it's about service. And these came to me and it's bothered me a little bit. The first one is supposed to be a truck driver came in on a Friday, paid in full at 3 o'clock, and was told he couldn't get his water turned on till Monday. Is that true or fact?
I don't think that's quite the way it happened.
That's the email that you all got.
Yes.
That's that first concern that I shared with you all. That was part of that minutes violation.
Sandy would know what happened after. Supposedly she called Mike and Mike said no.
Or he'd get to it if he could, was the
Yeah,
response.
but it didn't happen. Which made my first question, who is Mike's boss?
I guess I am.
Is it you? Is it Sandy? Or does he have no boss?
It's the board.
Yeah, the entire board.
Well, then, I guess I don't quite understand how the orders get out to him, but I'll guarantee you that if there was a problem on the street and it was 3:25 and I go at 3:30, they would be out there and take care of it. And that, to me, is the same service you need to put out. If Mike has to work 15 minutes longer, so be it. That's his job. He is ahead of that area. Am I not right?
Agreed.
Okay. The second one that bothered me, and I don't know if there's any truth to this or not, we had one day where we had no employees in the water department. Is that true or fact?
It's a true story.
Why did that happen?
She had scheduled that day off 3 times, it had been canceled. Charlotte got sick. It was on a day of the month that normally there's, you know, the buildings are all done, everything's done. And Charlotte was gone. Scheduled to go out of town
Well,
So
I
what
guess
happens on a day like that then, if,
when you're ahead of something,
well, there wasn't one single message, there were no payments taken that day, so it wasn't like it was a real busy day.
I mean, I can imagine that with just 2 staff that might come up, especially, yeah,
well, the part
Unless
that, the
COVID,
part that
but-
bothers me is Megan offered to help. I understand that, and Megan's a great young lady. But that puts one of our people into a private entity collecting money, and I don't like that. Okay? You should have somebody in there, and not picking on Sandy, but if you're the head of something, I don't care if something comes up, you have to take care of it. That's your job. I think it's ridiculous not to have anybody in the water department for an entire day. Those are just my personal feelings. Not against the people, it should not happen.
I think it should be excessively rare, but I can see where something might randomly come up. And I think it would be, based on those circumstances, understandable. And if you've got somebody that's willing to help out that day, that's really nice. But I would definitely agree that that's not something,
Yeah, she had a
That
sign
should
up
happen.
explaining what was going on and what to do.
Do they
So,
have the
I will
ability
say-
to get a temporary person that day? Do you have ability to call Kelly Services on something like that? Because
Well, when they
honestly,
go,
like Sandy could have a trip planned for a week out of town with a
yeah,
flight.
we wouldn't have allowed that.
And then, well, yeah, but I mean, if she did and the other gal got sick with coronavirus, you have nobody here and she couldn't cancel her trip, so looking long-term at that, Kelly Services or something like that, a temporary person in here to cover if you need be.
I don't know if you could train them that fast on the
I don't know.
software and everything else. Megan, they already have where if somebody would come in to make a payment, Megan, plus they have the Dropbox and everything else.
Do you have any board members that could cover?
That know the software.
Well, I'm not sure. Is our deputy clerk supposed to know your software?
Megan knows the software, and yeah, and I'm sure you do too, but
May I speak to this point?
Sure.
This day was rescheduled, as Fred said. It's at our slowest time of the month. It was on the 21st of October. At this time period, the people that are billed in that month are late. They're late after the 15th. So after the 15th of the month, our walk-in customers drop to very few during the day. We might have 5 or 6, 7 or 8. I put a sign up that said, "We are closed. I'm sorry we're closed for today. If you wish to drop off a payment, put it in an envelope and give it to Megan or Deanne, or put it in the drop slot." I don't recall that we got very many payments when I got back the next day. We might have had a couple, but nobody had to make change. If there were payments left at all, they were a check with a stub. There were no messages left on the phone. This is our slowest time of the month. And I had plans to go out of state for the day. This has happened once in probably 25 years. My sign on the door said, "We're sorry for any inconvenience." And I truly am sorry, but as far as I know, no one was inconvenienced this one time. Thank you.
And I think with COVID and coronavirus, the way things are right now, I think people are experiencing this all across the board. This is not just something that's happened here. So I think people are short-staffed, they're closing down, closing their doors, they can't be open that day. I mean, there's a lot of random things that we're experiencing right now. It is the craziest year of our life, without a doubt, so.
So just to kind of speak to Deanne's and Megan's ability to help, so, when they are down to one person, they've encouraged them to go to lunch and they'll cover and they do all that stuff anyway, so, don't think that they don't help out more often than it's coming out, because they do, and they don't mind, they don't complain about it, but they definitely do it more often than I think is perceived, which is, again, perfectly fine, and I think if we wanted to be petty, then I would have said, hey guys, you're not doing it, they can figure it out, but understanding it's a small office and I have zero issues with that, so I just kind of want to bring out that they do a good job, but to that point though, Gene makes with handling money or anything else, that specific day, if somebody did need help, you and Megan did have access to your software to even help them. So that could have been a problem, no, it wasn't, but, it's something else to think about along with the money handling that Mr. Walker brought up.
Well, I guess at this point right now, I'm not in favor of getting rid of either one of the members.
Okay.
I'm more in favor of waiting 6 months down the line and see if they pick somebody that's gotta be the boss. Sandy's supposed to have a boss, Mike's supposed to have a boss. Somebody's got to lead those people and tell them what they need to do. It's not their decision, it's supposed to be the boss's decision. And then take a look at it 6 months and see if we've made any corrections or not. And I don't know if we're the people supposed to be looking at that, but it's been put in front of us.
Mhm.
So that's my recommendation, that we just keep everything the way it is for 6 months. They've heard our views, they know what we don't like about what's been going on. In 6 months, take a look at it, get together with Fred, get together with Dottie, the new, I believe it's Christie, is coming on. It's not that there's lack of intelligence, trust me, I know all of them. It's just somebody hasn't taken the ball and said, I am the boss. When your members bring it to you, you are the boss.
Right, and with in mind, we don't live up here, so we appreciate the tournaments coming, because that's the only way we find out anything is going on.
That's my recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I just have to say that if I felt like Fred, Sandy, or Dottie didn't care about it and were intentionally blowing us off, I'd say let's get rid of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I honestly do not believe that to be the case.
I agree.
So I will just say, I'm okay with it. It will come back up again in the near future. The other thing I addressed to you is everything waiting for the last minute. So that impacts Deanne's ability to do her job, and we talked about that a few months ago. That has to stop. Because now you're impacting, our city clerk that's got a job to do by waiting for stuff till the last minute. So I would like to see you guys come back to us with how you're gonna address these concerns. And maybe it's come back to a council meeting on what you're gonna do to prevent this stuff from happening in the future, or I will continue to bring it back up.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. So where does this petition go? I mean, that is still hanging out.
Yeah, I think they have like 150 or 175 signatures, which is more than what they need. They did stop it because when it was presented to me, I brought it up to the city attorney. They missed, I think they missed that deadline by about 1 or 2 days, according to the county auditor. So then if we feel need be, it can come back up as a special election vote to get it wrapped back up. So I would say, I would address this stuff in the next few months because that's getting into special election time that, I still would consider proposing that.
Yeah, because that would be out of our hands.
That's right. It goes to the voters. And I will tell you, you do have some unhappy people in the community about the water. So I think you guys got some damage control to do with the public and how you communicate to them, how often you communicate to them, and really change how you address that front facing public. Because if I was you, that email that I sent that I heard, that's concerning. And I would be all over, our staff if I heard that too. And initially on, I talked to my department heads that there wasn't a great feel from the public when I took office, but I expect them to smile, wave, talk to the public. I think you guys are kind of in that same boat a little bit. You may need to be a little bit more proactive.
Yeah, we've had this discussion, like when you send out an email and you want a response, I can't call a board member. Two people is a quorum.
Mhm.
So we have to wait till our next meeting.
Well, you can call a special meeting though, you guys have that in your ability. So you don't, and I told you that a few months ago.
But I just wanna speak on behalf of that as far as, that's not something that should be expected to happen on a regular basis though, correct? I mean, that might be random.
Yeah, I mean, there's only a handful of emails that I've sent to you on that stuff outside of the in-person meetings we've had. So it's not like that's a lot.
Well, it's a ship that moves slow because we don't have enough meetings and have enough, you know.
Yeah, one meeting a
And,
month.
and, you know, getting new board members and then losing them and, you know,
Right.
so it's just like, oh.
Well, I don't think anybody's gonna complain if you guys spend, what do you guys make per meeting, per board member, $25?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's gonna complain if you call extra meetings to address these issues, right?
You only need 20.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Right, but I think what you're hearing is you need to address it, so y'all might have some special meetings in the near future.
Alright,
Yeah, that's possible, yep.
Alright, so,
anything else? Any other questions?
okay, so for now, do you guys wanna take a motion, does anybody wanna take a motion to table item number 14?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
So we got a motion and a second, all in favor, please respond with aye.
Aye.
Alright, that motion carries. On to item number 15, non-agenda items, public discussion. Okay. Hearing none. We'll move on to item number 16, which is mayor and council reports. So, had a call today with our bond council, about getting into an agreement with the realtor. Extremely positive. We should be able to have that on the next agenda, which is exciting. So bond council feels very confident that we've got that figured out. It just moved a little bit slower than I would like. We talked about that a little bit. We got added a language into the, it looks like the police union's okay adding that non-certified wage that we kind of briefly talked about early on. Today was day one of police negotiations, and the building didn't burn down, so that's favorable. So I don't see a whole lot of problems. We still items that we gotta work out, and we'll have probably another 1 or 2 meetings. The personnel committee was there for that, along with our attorney, so, and our 2 stewards and the union reps, so. So feel fairly good about that. PD schedules, had some conversation with the chief. The personnel committee was copied on that too, about how advantageous is it for us to switch to 5/8 versus 4/10s? And, you know, him and Sergeant Weber are working on that, so we'll continue to analyze it. If it's not the right way to go, then that's fine. But I think we owe it a good hard look to see what the benefits are, so. And we just had that conversation today, so it needs a little bit more time to work on that. Otherwise, I think that is it for me. Council?
So do you have a closing schedule on the property?
So we already did the closing. So the closing,
Yeah,
right
I
now,
thought I was waiting on the
it was October 30th, right? No,
proceedings.
September 30th? Holy cow. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, so the closing's done, we just need to get, the problem is we need to get into an agreement from realtor so they can start trying to draw business. But bond counsel, since it's TIF money, there's a little bit more robust rules associated with that and how it's done. So we couldn't just use our city attorney to draft that up. You need bond counsel to do it, then get the city attorney involved, so it's that lovely government red tape stuff, so.
I guess I'm surprised they do a closing without the proceeds.
They did. So you guys approved that purchase, yep, you guys approved that purchase, yep. So then it's just, that money was transferred to the attorney, and the attorney wrote them the check, and. Yeah.
Okay. I'm way behind, all right. When was the first time?
So yeah, no, that process is done, but, you know, the realtor is chomping at the bit to start getting going on this, and I think as we all are, so. You know, there's some stuff that when I'm able to share that, if the process works the way it looks like it's clear to work, it helps us, for once, maybe reduce some of that government red tape, if we do it the way that it's proposed, so. So that should help speed things up a little bit. Folks?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Well, you're at 7:23, thanks.
The option of doing,
Gene, do you have anything else?